Welcome to Cybersecure, your go-to destination for all things cybersecurity. In our last video, we talked about vulnerability management and why it's important. Today, we'll dive deeper into the first step of vulnerability management, risk assessment and scanning. We'll cover what is a risk assessment, how to understand vulnerability scanning, and how to identify vulnerabilities in your system. We'll also include some real-world examples to help you understand the importance of risk assessment and scanning. So, let's get started. Conducting a risk assessment. A risk assessment is the process of identifying and analyzing potential risks to your organization's digital assets. This can involve evaluating the likelihood and impact of various threats, such as malware infections, hacking attempts, or social engineering attacks. By conducting a risk assessment, you can prioritize your vulnerability management efforts and ensure that you're addressing the most critical risks first. Understanding vulnerability scanning. Vulnerability scanning is the process of using automated tools to identify potential vulnerabilities in your system and network infrastructure. These tools can scan your entire network or specific systems and applications to identify known vulnerabilities or configuration issues that could be exploited by attackers. Vulnerability scanning can help you identify vulnerabilities that you may have overlooked and prioritize your vulnerability management efforts. Identifying vulnerabilities. Once you've conducted a risk assessment and vulnerability scan, the next step is to identify the specific vulnerabilities that need to be addressed. This can involve analyzing the results of your vulnerability scans, reviewing system and application logs, and performing manual testing to identify potential weaknesses. By identifying vulnerabilities, you can prioritize your remediation efforts and ensure that critical vulnerabilities are addressed first. To illustrate the importance of risk assessment and scanning, let's take a look at a few real-world examples. Example 1. Marriott data breach. In 2018, Marriott suffered a data breach that exposed the personal information of over 500 million guests. The cause of the breach was a vulnerability in the company's reservation system that had not been properly patched. A risk assessment and vulnerability scan could have identified this vulnerability and allowed Marriott to patch it before it was exploited by attackers. Example 2. Equifax breach. As we discussed in our previous video, the Equifax breach was caused by a vulnerability in the Apache Struts framework. This vulnerability was known and had been patched, but Equifax had failed to apply the patch in a timely manner. A vulnerability scan could have identified the unpatched vulnerability and allowed Equifax to address it before it was exploited by attackers. Example 3. Heartbleed vulnerability. The Heartbleed vulnerability was a critical vulnerability in the OpenSSL cryptographic software library that was discovered in 2014. The vulnerability allowed attackers to steal sensitive information, including passwords and private keys, from vulnerable systems. A vulnerability scan could have identified systems that were vulnerable to Heartbleed and allowed organizations to patch the vulnerability before it was exploited by attackers. In conclusion, risk assessment and scanning are essential parts of vulnerability management. By conducting a risk assessment, using vulnerability scanning tools, and identifying specific vulnerabilities, you can prioritize your vulnerability management efforts and reduce the risk of cyber attacks. Remember to regularly conduct risk assessments and vulnerability scans to stay ahead of emerging threats. We hope you found it helpful and informative. If you enjoyed this video, like, comment, share and subscribe. Thanks again for watching and we'll see you in the next video on Cybersecure.